sabi nga dito, yung DFA noong 2017, resolution na ito ito na yung nilagdaan ng 12 senador na para hilingin sa kinauukulang komite ng Senado na magpatawag ng investigasyon at imbestigahan na itong mga troll farm na ito. Kasunod na yan nung sinabi ni Lacson. Pero ang pinakamatibay dito, pinatutunayan lamang nung COA report, yung sinabi ni Lacson na merong Undersecretary na nagpapatakbo ng mga troll farm. Ayan po, Ang sabi dito, nangyari na niya ito Similar, had a similar in 2017 social media consultancy contract with a known pro-administration blogger who has been accused na naparatangan na naglalako ng fake news at nagpapakalat ng mga hateful comments, yung mga nakagagalit na opinion, di ba? Laban sa mga kritiko ng administrasyon. Sabi pa the Duterte administration even appointed some of these bloggers. Nagawa pa niyang maitalaga ang ilan sa mga vlogger na ito na nasa likod niyang fake news ang tinutukoy, di ba? And social media personalities sa mga matataas na posisyon sa iba't ibang departamento at ahensya ng gobyerno. Ano tawag mo kay Mocha? Di ba? The above instances, ito raw mga pangyayaring ito, illustrate paano ba Tagalogin yung illustrate? Naglalarawan, di ba? Na ang troll farms at ang misinformation and fake news that they propagate may be state-backed and state-funded. Yan po, mga kaibigan. Nagpapahiwatig na ang mga troll farm na ito at yung mga pagpapakalat ng mga maling impormasyon at peking balita na kanilang pinalalaganap ay tinutulungan ng gobyerno. Mga kaibigan, in this connection, sabi po nila sa kanilang resolusyon, Congress should look into government funds. Dapat daw busisiin itong mga pondong ito ng gobyerno na ginagamit para pondohan ang mga misinformation and fake news na nakakaapekto sa milyon-milyong Pilipino. Ang sabi ng mga senador, allegations of the use of public funds for the operation of troll farms cannot be dismissed. Ang paratang daw sa paggamit ng pondo ng taong bayan para sa operation itong mga troll farm na ito ay hindi mo pwedeng isantabi. Given that Filipinos regularly use media sites such as Facebook, making them vulnerable to internet trolls. Yan. Sa madalit sabi, kanya-kanya sila ng dahilan. Ang mga pumirma po dito, si Vicente Soto III, Senate President, Senate President pro tempore Ralph Recto, Minority Leader Franklin Drilon, and Senators Nancy Binay, Leila de Lima, Richard Gordon, Risa Ontiveros, Panfilo Lacson, Emmanuel Pacquiao, Francis Pangilinan, Grace po at Joel Villanueva. Makatwid, pati sa pirmahan po, absent si Lito Lapid. Ang swerte ng taong ito, no? Walang ginagawa, nagkakamal. Iyan mga kaibigan Bakit? Napwesto yata yung anak, di ba? Nakapwesto na naman Nakasabsab na naman Iba na labangan, sumasabsab pa rin, di ba? Basta pagpalit ng sabsaban po, mga kaibigan, pagpalit ng administrasyon, doon lumilipat itong si Lito Lapid. Subukan mo, lumubog ang barko nito, nandoon na naman yan, sasabsab na naman yan sa panibagong labangan. Ginagamit lang ang pwesto. Ang swerte, no? Walang ginagawa. Wala kang marinig, ni ha, ni ho. Meron ba? Wala bueno, pagsisinungaling ang trolling, masama yan Paglalako ng kahayupan na kasinungalingan, mga kaibigan, masama ito lalo na dahil sa darating na halalan. Kung mahalal ang bagong presidente at ibang opisyal dahil sa peking impormasyon, magkakaroon tayo ng peking presidente at opisyal. Yan ang sabi. Halimbawa, nagkaroon nga naman ng lokohan sa eleksyon, di ba? Isipin mo, dahil sa troll, peke ang naging presidente. Bakit? Palilitawin Yan ang sinasabi ko sa inyo tignan ninyo. Nangyayari na lahat Yung tungkol dun sa buwatan, di ba? Katulad ng survey. Kasama yan yung survey. Yung sa buwatan ng survey ng Comelec, ng Smartmatic, and media, media, dati ito, ewan ko ngayon, kung ano magiging papel ng media. Siyempre, maraming gutom ngayon sa media Di natin masasabi kung merong makapaninindigang kamukha ni Ninoy Aquino. Wala ngayon po, mga kaibigan, yan yung sinasabi natin. Masama magiging epekto Sipin mo, puro kasinungalingan. Di nakakalimutan natin, dayaan, di ba? Dahil lang mumurahin yan, lahat ng mga magiging sagabal, para maluklok ang isang hindi naman ibinotong presidente. Pwedeng mangyari yan sa kasalukuyang administrasyon at sa mga pakawala nilang kandidato. Di ba? Pwede mangyari yan. Dahil nga dyan sa troll. Dahil yan, hindi naman mga totoo yung mga nasa likod ng account na yan Di ba? Basta lang magmumura yan. Sino habulin mo dyan? Mga kaibigan, mabuti na lang yung Rappler, alam nila kung paano ginagawa yan di ba? Paano minamanipulate yan, paano ino-operate yung troll farm. Isa sa nakakaalam yung Rappler mga kaibigan, kaya dapat, pagka natuloy itong investigasyon, ipatawag si Maria Ressa o kaya yung sino mang makapagpapaliwanag sa Rappler, di ba? At ito pa, ang pinaka-importanting punto na dapat ninyong mapansin ito. Ang nabulgar dito sa COA audit, matagal nang nabubulgar ito, inimbestigahan din ng Senado ito, pero wala nangyari. Meron pa yung ASEAN funds na wala nangyari, walang nag-imbestiga. Kulang sa 1 bilyon ang naibulsa ron, mga kaibigan. Ngayon, PCOO rin ang involved dito. Di ba may nag-resign pang Undersecretary doon para mamatay yung issue? Di ba? nag-resign yung isa. Ngayon, eto ho ang dapat ninyong mapansin. Isipin mo ang gobyerno, malaki pondo niyang PCOO. Bilyon din ang pondo niyan. Hindi naman ganong karami ang empleyado, pero sila ang nagpapatakbo ng government media. Ano-ano yan? Ang dami niyan Yung Bureau of Broadcast, iyan po ang nasa likod nitong mga himpilan ng radyo. Network ito ng Philippine Broadcasting Service, PBS. Ilang istasyon yan nationwide, mga kaibigan. Buong Pilipinas, halos lahat ng lalawigan sa Pilipinas, meron pong, lalo na sa mga malalayo, merong istasyon ng ng PBS at ng Bureau of Broadcast. Ano pa? Channel 4. Di ba yan yung pinagyayabang ni Andanar doon sa investigasyon sa kanila nung una, mga kaibigan, na ano raw yan? Nagkaroon daw ng improvement at makikipag-compete na sa mga nangungunang istasyon. Hanggang ngayon, tignan ninyo, walang nanonood sa television ng gobyerno. Nawala na nga yung ABS-CBN, hindi pa rin makakumpit. Mga kaibigan, wala pa rin nanonood. Yung Philippine News Agency, Philippine Information Agency, ang dami niyan mga kaibigan Ngayon, ang liwanag Ibig sabihin, merong failure sa management ng PCOO. Kasi kung hindi failure, mga kaibigan, very effective yan. Sobra-sobra sana. Ang media ng gobyerno, sobra-sobra. Sipin mo, ang istasyon mo kasing lakas ng ABS-CBN o baka mas malakas pa, mga kaibigan, ang power. Pero walang nanonood. Sino may problema? Yung namamahala ang may problema. Hindi ba? Mga kaibigan, merong radio station, pinakamarami itong istasyon. Ngayon, pinakamalaking network yan. Yang government radio, mga kaibigan. Pero bakit hindi effective? Gaya na nga ng sinabi ng Facebook, natuklasan nila, pati yung mga account niyang government media na yan, tinanggal ng Facebook. Bakit? Kasi ito'y state-controlled anya. Hindi ito patas. Di ba? Hindi magiging patas pag sinabi mong state-controlled o government-controlled. Yung pong station. Na ang palalaganapin niyan, fake news din. Mga kaibigan, yun ang para sa akin, ang pinaka, main issue laban sa kanila. Di ba? Hindi yung kung ano-anong sinasabing gagamitin ng pera sa ganito, sa ganon. Mga kaibigan, napakalaking kahihiyan yan. Yaan pong ang dami mong hinahawakang media, walang naniniwala sa'yo. Yun din ang sinasabi ng Facebook, kaya sila binansagang state-controlled media. Yun ang ibig sabihin nun. Wala kayong credibility. Kaya walang naniniwala sa kanila. Ito nga, sabi nung iba, pwede rin ito na dapat daw mag-invest sa totoong farms. Yung totoong farms, hindi yung troll farm. Parang buti pa si Bea Alonso. Nakita ba ninyo yung mango farm ni Bea Alonso sa YouTube. Bay, ang ganda eh. Parang farm bill eh. Ang ganda ng pagkakasalansa ng mga puno. Di ba? Ang linis. Mga kaibigan, dapat anya mag-imbes sa totoong farms ng mga gulay at prutas, hindi sa troll farms. Yan ang sabi ng ni Senador Pangilinan. Sinabi rin niya o binigyan din ni Pangilinan na ang false information at misinformation can cause harm to the nation.
Walang preno kung bumatikos, malalim at makatwirang komentaryo. Mag-ingat ang mga politikong gumagawa ng kalokohan at baka kayo ay tamaan ng Lapid Fire!
Sayang ito na mapapakinggan Lalo na yung hindi inabot si Senador Benigno Aquino Jr. at saka tayong mga hindi pa nakakaunawa nun. Binanggit naman niya rin yan dyan, mga kaibigan. Tayong hindi pa natin naiintindihan ng mga issue nun dahil nung panahon ng martial law hindi naman patas ang impormasyong nakakarating sa taong bayan. Kamukha ngayon, di ba? Ito, pakinggan natin.
You very well know that we have a law in the Philippines that says no president may stay in the presidency for more than 8 consecutive years. That is a law. That is a law even ahead of the United States law. No president may stay for more than 8 years. In 1972, Mr. Marcos was already 7 years in office. He had 1 year to go. He was toying with the idea of fielding Imelda, but Imelda showed very poor in the polls. So what did Mr. Marcos do? Change the Constitution, sabi niya. So he called the Constitutional Convention in 1970. We were a handful in the Senate who denounced this, and I told the Senate, we should not allow an open Constitutional Convention because it's very dangerous. Even America, I said, has never called a Constitutional Convention since 1776. They have amended their Constitution piecemeal, but they never opened it. But we lost, and a Constitutional Convention was called. People were elected. And very quietly, Mr. Marcos started maneuvering to change our form of government from an American-type presidential system to a British-type parliamentary so that he can be elected as a deputy from Ilocos, become prime minister, and then stay on forever. That was the plan. However, on January 2, 1972, most of you are already here in America. Some of you maybe were too young to remember. But on January 1972, almost 9 years ago today, an old man, a retired ambassador from Leyte, his name is Eduardo Quintero, who is now in San Francisco, stood up on the floor of the Constitutional Convention and shocked the entire Filipino people with the expose that Malacanang has been giving envelopes to members of the Constitutional Convention, buying their votes so that they will vote for a parliamentary form of government to allow Mr. Marcos to extend his term beyond the 8 years. The nation was shocked. Immediately the NBI swooped down into the house of Quintero, and then they opened up an aparador, walang susi, and they said 500,000 pesos in cash were found in the aparador of Quintero. The implication was the opposition gave him 500,000 to make his expose. But if there were 500,000, bakit walang susi yun? Hindi naman 50 pesos lang yun. To cut a long story short, a delegate from Cebu, his name is Napoleon Ram, stood up on the convention floor and said, "Wag na tayo magtalo. Let us not discuss who received or who did not receive. I am now filing a resolution that will provide, if we approve this constitutional convention, this constitutional amendment, this new constitution, no incumbent president or his spouse may seek office." Out sa kulumbo si Mr. Marcos. Sa takot ng mga delegado, because they will be accused if they voted no, that they received the envelope, everybody voted yes. Nalagot si Mr. Marcos. This Rama resolution was overwhelmingly passed. Mr. Marcos and Imelda Marcos are out of the running. So what will Mr. Marcos do? Hindi na pwede sa 1935 Constitution. Hindi na po pwede dito sa bagong Constitution. The only reason left or the only excuse and the only option left for Mr. Marcos is to declare martial law. And so what happened? The students demonstrated in the streets. Sabi ng agent ni Marcos, sige pa, dagdagan pa nyo. More demonstration in the street. Sige pa. Finally, bombings started in Manila. And did you know, my friends, the Manila police captured one of the bombers. And one of these bombers in Manila was identified as a sergeant of the firearms and explosive section of the Philippine Constabulary. The following day, this man was snatched from the Manila police and we never heard from him again. And then, on September 23, midnight, Mr. Marcos went on television and said, I, Ferdinand Marcos, acting as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, by virtue of the provision of the Constitution which states, in case of invasion, insurrection, rebellion, or imminent danger thereof, I may declare martial law or suspend the writ of habeas corpus. Therefore, I now declare martial law and shall administer this country alone. On that day, democracy died. And so Mr. Marcos arrested together with us in the Senate most of the leaders in the Constitutional Convention. All of those opposing him went to jail with us. And then when they went to jail with us, all the other members of the convention were herded and they were given a constitution by Mr. Marcos and they were told to sign. And everybody signed, except those in jail with us. And once this new constitution was signed by them, he released the delegates. And then on January 17, 1973, Mr. Marcos went on television and said, ladies and gentlemen and my countrymen, there is now a new constitution. But how can we have a new constitution? There was no plebiscite. You know that the law says before you can have a new constitution, you must present it to the Filipino people, and the Filipino people must, in a secret ballot, write yes or no. What happened? Tinawag ni Mr. Marcos sa mga citizens' assembly. Tinawag niya mga barrio councils. And then in the middle of this meeting, tinanong, kayo ba'y gutom na? Yes. Taas ang kamay. Taas. Lahat ng tabas. Approve ang konstitusyon. My friends, this is not fiction. Because in the now famous Habiliana case, Habiliana versus Executive Secretary, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Habiliana went to the Supreme Court and questioned the illegality of this Constitution. And what did the Supreme Court say? Out of 10 justices, 6 out of 10 said this Constitution was not validly ratified. According to the 1935 Constitution and according even to the new Constitution, it was not validly ratified. But then the Supreme Court added, but there is nothing to stop it. So, we had a Constitution. And so, my friends, we started with an American-type Constitution. We moved to a British-type Constitution. We had a parliamentary form of government without a parliament. Until 1978, we did not have a parliament. And yet, we were supposed to be a parliamentary form of government. And Mr. Marcos said, I declared martial law to save democracy. But by saving democracy, he killed it. And so, my friends, it was not until 1978 that the Batasan was convened. Now what do we hear? Mr. Marcos, once again, is up again to his new tricks. He said, I lifted martial law, but I think we should now elect a president by direct vote. But there is no such thing. Under the new constitution now, the president is purely ceremonial. Tigabukas lang ng pinto, tagatanggap lamang ng credential ng ambassador. Purely ceremonial, elected by parliament. He's not elected by the people. The power of the government under a parliamentary system rests on the prime minister, and the prime minister must be elected by parliament, and this prime minister may be removed from office if there is a vote of no confidence. That's the British type. So what did Mr. Marcos do in 1976? He amended the constitution and said, I, Ferdinand Marcos, as Prime Minister, President, may dissolve Parliament, but Parliament cannot dissolve me. And then he said, Parliament may legislate, but if I think they're not doing the job, I will also legislate. So now we have two parliaments, Mr. Marcos and Parliament. And it's costing us 300 million to have that tuta Parliament. And what's the use? If Mr. Marcos is doing all the legislation, why give these 200 guys? So what do? They changed the name of the street of Divisoria They changed the name of a school, but when it comes to public decrees like Public Order Code 1737, only Mr. Marcos signs it. And so we have a situation where we have a man who can dissolve Parliament, but Parliament cannot dissolve him. And under the Amendment number 6 of the 1973 Constitution, Mr. Marcos is a president for life. And now, all of a sudden, 2 weeks ago, sabi niya, I have lifted martial law. But I now want to go to the Filipino people and I want their mandate of 8 years. I will defend martial law. Anybody who's opposed it can oppose me. I want to go to the people and get their mandate. But how can you get a mandate? There's no such thing in the Constitution. Sagot ni Marcos, let us amend it. So now we're going to amend again the Constitution. And so we asked Mr. Marcos, but what form of government will we have? Sabi niya, I want a president with powers. What happened to the parliamentary type British? Forget it. Let us now go to France. Let us have a French model. And so, my friends, it is like the Odyssey of Jules Verne, 80 days around the world. We started with America, we went to England, now we're going to France. Under the new proposal of Mr. Marcos, we will now have a president and a prime minister. But the prime minister will be appointed by the president. And this president now will be all-powerful. It will not be the American type, it will be the French type. And I suppose 2 years from now, when he gets tired of that, he will go to the Russian type, whatever that is. And so he announced, I will take anybody, including Aquino. And so, I was not inclined to oblige him, but then he added, pero sabi niya, hindi pwede si Aquino underage. And so naturally, I went to the books. I said, how come I am underage? I thought I was already 48. Because the rule before, to become president of the Philippines in 1935, all you had to do is to be 40 years old. And so I looked at the book. Tama nga naman si Marcos. They've increased the age to 50. Kapos na naman ako ng dalawa. Of course, Mr. Marcos said, pero kung talagang gusto niya Aquino, if he really wants to come home and to fight me, I will oblige him. I will also have the Constitution amended for him.
Napakinggan po ninyo mga kaibigan kung paano minanipula yung pong konstitusyon ng Pilipinas. Ngayon lang natin naunawaan lahat yan eh. Di ba? Kung mabuti na lamang, nandyan yung mga video na yan, available para mapakinggan nating lahat. Totoo naman lahat yung sinabi ni dating Senador Benigno Aquino. Kung hindi po nagkaroon ng kung hindi siya napatay, hindi magigising ang taong bayan, mga kaibigan. Ngayon, ang sa atin antayin ba nating mangyari pa yon? Magkakaroon tayo ng eleksyon. Nagsasama-sama ang mga walang hiyang politiko, di ba? Sa panig ng kasalukuyang administrasyon. Bakit nila ginagawa yan? Sapagkat iniisip nila na ang administrasyon bukod sa kwarta, pondo, hawak nito, kontrolado nito ang mga pwedeng magmanipula ng eleksyon. At kapag natapos ang eleksyon ay pwedeng kontrolado pa rin ang Korte Suprema. Kita ninyo yung binanggit ni Senador Aquino, yung ratification ng kung paano minanipulate, yung ratification ng konstitusyon na ginawa ni Marcos, na pinapirmahan sa mga delegado ng Constitutional Convention. Mga kaibigan, binago nila kasi yung ginawa ng Constitutional Convention na original, wala nang pwedeng makatakbo kay Marcos, kay Imelda, out sila. Kaya ang ginawa, nung nag-martial law, pinahuli yung mga delegado na tutol kay Marcos, yung mga gumawa no, mga pumirma ron, nakapasa yun eh. Pagkatapos ay itinira yung mga kanya at pinapirma yung mga delegado ng Constitutional Convention doon sa ibinigay nilang binago, revised na version ng konstitusyon. Pagkatapos, wala namang parliament. Parliamentary yung ginawa na pinapirma ni Marcos, pero wala namang parliament na nangyari. Walang naihalal until 1978. From 1973, isipin ninyo, ang layo ng agwat. Hindi naman naisakatuparan yung parliamentary form of government. Di ba? Hanggang 1978 lamang tayo nagkaroon, naghalal ng mga kinatawan. Puro kanila pa yon, mga kaibigan. So, ang babala ni Ninoy Aquino, nagumpisa yan, senador pa siya. Nung itayo ang Constitutional Convention, tinututulan ng Senado niya. Pero wala silang nagawa. Naitatag yung Senado. Nilagay pa ng presidente niya ni Marcos dyan, di ba? Yung tatay ni Gloria, si Diosdedo Macapagal, mga kaibigan. Ngayon, ang sa atin po, antayin ba natin na mangyari yan? Kaya nga nagsasama-sama yung mga mandurugas na politiko dyan, di ba? Sila-sila rin.
Sa bayan ko ay isa ang lahi, dito'y wala ang pagkukunwari. Hindi padagaig, sadyang kilala sa daigdig, may pagkakaisa sa bawat nais.
Magandang gabi, Sikwatari Ramon Lopez.
Mahal sa'yo, ang bayan ko'y punong-puno ng yaman. Bakit ito'y kailangan pang iwanan? Hindi nga ba't anong sarap mabuhay ng buong ganap? Sa bayan mo, sumapit ng yaong wakas. Dito sa bayan ko, lahat kami pantay-pantay. Walang nang-aabit, ang pag-ibig ay tunay. Dito sa bayan ko, dito'y makikilala mo ang mga kaibigang nagmamahal sa'yo. Dito sa bayan ko, lahat kami pantay-pantay. Walang nang-aapit, ang pag-ibig ay tunay. Dito sa bayan ko, dito'y makikilala mo ang isang kaibigan, ang mga kaibigan, ang bawat kaibigan na totoong